Please welcome your panelists for Artificial Intelligence, Beyond the Robot Singularity, moderated by Forbes media publisher and futurist, Rich Karlgaard.
If you looked at the number of times that artificial intelligence and all of the subjects that flow around it have been mentioned in the press, both the business press, technical press, and popular press over the last 3 years, you would have seen a hockey stick explosion. I don't think there's a bigger issue in technology, and technology is going to affect the business landscape than artificial intelligence. So we've assembled, the Milken people have assembled a great panel here to really dive into what's real about AI, particularly as it applies to business and particularly as it applies to some of the investment opportunities. What's real, what's perhaps overestimated, what's underestimated, and we hope you all walk out of here at the end of the hour with a better understanding and a practical understanding of where AI is going to go in the next 2 to 5 years. We've got a great balance of a panel. We've got 3 technologists and we have 2 investment managers. So I'll start just very brief introductions. On my far left and your audience right, we have Tom Siebel, the founder and CEO of C3 IoT, based in the San Francisco Bay Area. We have Usman Shuja, the business general manager of industrial IoT for SparkCognition in Austin, Texas. Sumant Mandal, investor, is a managing director of Marsh Capital Partners based in Santa Monica. They're a venture capital firm. We have Virginie Maisonneuve of the near $200 billion Singapore-based fund, almost as big as Singapore's sovereign wealth fund, Temasek. And then at the end, last but not least, we have Tom Bianculli, who's the Chief Technology Officer of Zebra Technologies based near Chicago. I'm going to start out with Tom Siebel. Tom, you had a cover story in McKinsey Quarterly in December 2017, so just a few months ago, on why CEOs and boards of directors, not just IT departments, but why the very top leadership at companies today not only need to think about this, but need to put this at the top of their agenda. Explain your thinking here.
This is my 4th decade in the information technology business. I'm a computer scientist from the University of Illinois. I was involved in the development of the relational database industry with Larry Ellison, and then went on to found a company called Siebel Systems, where we established this market that's known as CRM. Now, when I started in the information technology business, it was about a $200 billion business worldwide. Today, it's $2 trillion, and then by 2023, we expect it to be $8 trillion. As we brought these technologies to market, mainframe computing, mini computing, personal computing, enterprise application software, the internet, whatever it may be, we were always selling to CIOs who would evaluate and then do RFPs and whatnot. Well, something fundamentally has changed in the 21st century, because as we talk with our customers and now Engie, Caterpillar, John Deere, the United States Air Force, at every table, the CEO is at the table driving this thing called digital transformation. I couldn't figure out what that was. I think, like, as opposed to what? I mean, analog transformation? And, you know, so I've given this a lot of thought, and now I think I understand what's happening. First of all, what is the CEO doing at the table? The CEO has not been here for the last 40 years. And the CEO is appointing somebody in the person of a chief digital officer who has a blank check, and it's their job to get it done at the Air Force, at Engie, at John Deere, at the Department of at DOD. What's happening is there is a mass extinction event going on in the corporate world. Okay? So far this century, 52% of the Fortune 500 companies have disappeared from the planet. I mean, where's Westinghouse? Okay, where's Toys R Us? Where's GE? Okay, and these companies are disappearing from the planet, 52%. And some people like John Chambers predict that in the next 10 years, 70% that those that remain will disappear. Now, what is happening? We're seeing this new generation of companies with new DNA that are emerging, like Uber, like Airbnb, like Facebook, like Amazon. And it's all about AI, big data, and IoT, and they're completely disrupting industries. So we have Tesla, with a fraction of the revenue of Ford with greater market cap. We have Amazon with 1/5 of the revenue of Walmart with greater market cap. And what's Amazon? Big data, AI, and IoT focused at retail. What's Tesla? Big data, AI, IoT on wheels. What's Uber? Big data, AI, and IoT, no cars, no drivers, and they're completely transforming the automotive industry. So these CEOs, I think, have realized that this is a survival event. And either we adopt this new generation technologies or we're GE, okay? We adopt this new technology. I mean, if you're Walmart looking down the barrel of the gun and you're looking at, with Amazon pointing both barrels at you, you're in a world of hurt. So it's, there's a lot of change going on, and I think this is an existential event. And that's what's driving this market. This market is expected to be, this software market for big data, IoT, AI is expected to be a $250 billion software market in 2023. This is the fastest market we've seen in the history of the information technology business.
Virginie, you invest, how do you take something that's growing at that rate and sort out what is real and what is not real? We've had, in the history of AI was first proposed, I believe, by Marvin Minsky at MIT in the 1950s, and there have been these waves. And followed by a winter. There was a wave in the late 80s and early 90s, and it didn't quite play out. Is it different this time? Is what Tom is saying correct? And then if that's correct, how do you develop a kind of global investing theory behind it?
Well, thank you for the question. I think for me, having been in industries for over 30 years, one of the things that I try to do is always to think of long-term themes that shape the investment world. I've had themes like demography, so climate change is still one of my themes, but the AI theme, I think, is a defining theme. And the way to think about it, in my view, is in terms of not only investment opportunities, but also geopolitics, and what I call Darwinism. So I think AI will bring corporate and geopolitical Darwinism. And we can talk about it for a long time, but the essential elements are that in this race, and I normally don't quote Putin very often, but Putin said, who controls AI controls the world. And I think there is this race going on. We know that China has this target of 2030 to be the leader in AI. That goes with this 2025 Made in China strategy that we hear a lot about right now. And there's a very good reason for China to want to do that. The motivation is very simple. It's twofold. One, aging population and a huge pension gap at a time where 50% of China's activity can be automated through AI. And of course, winning that battle of AI is very important. Now, what are the other large nations? Of course, the US is the other large nation. So what I see is a polarized world as we march with this AI technology battle, if you want, a competitive threats. Countries like Japan will also do well, I think to a lesser degree, but the factors that I'm looking at that are really, really important are one, data. So China has close to 800 million internet users, US close to 300. Data, as we know with the incident of Facebook, is going to become more expensive, and privacy laws are going to really, in my view, become much more stringent. So China has a lot of data and definitely not the same regulatory pressure. Technology, so we know semiconductors is still an area of weakness for China, but it has a lot of engineers, it has a lot of technicians, it's gathering a lot of information. That's very important. The ecosystem as well in terms of culture and being open to it, and of course capital. And there you could say it's unfair, but there's a lot of ample and nearly free capital for China. So what does that do going forward? Again, with an investment perspective, is to think if you have a more polarized world, what happens to the rest of the world that cannot invest all those hundreds of billions of dollars in AI? And I think a lot of countries will have to choose who to be with, and that will increase inequality as well. Another part, but I'm not sure you want me to talk about this now, is the corporate side of things.
Well, I want to come back to that because the corporate side, alongside the geopolitical side, are huge, as you properly identified. But I want to get to Sumant. The subtitle of this panel is about Beyond the Robot Singularity. Raise your hand if you have kind of an idea of what singularity means. Why don't you define singularity? Because I think the danger here is when we start talking about singularity and jumping the tracks on from the human species as we know it today to some mix of human and robot and all of that. It's kind of fun Arthur C. Clarke stuff, but it obscures what you actually do in the real world, which is invest in this stuff.
Yeah, and I personally am not a very big believer in this singularity concept because I think as machines evolve, humans evolve as well. But I think what is very important to understand is that there's a lot of interest around AI today, but it's a very old science. This has been around for the last 40, 50 years, and the cost of compute, storage, and networking coming down to where now it's cost effective to use these technologies is what makes all of us what we do possible. Having said that, it is still a very narrow science in reality. So if you go to an enterprise and you say talk about AI in an enterprise, you're talking about AI in a very small silo. You go to 25 to 50% of a country's GDP could be manufacturing. That's not even connected to the internet yet. And the work Tom is doing and Usman is doing is helping companies do that, but it's still doing it in small functions. So that function could be, I take a business process and I'm going to automate it. And every 5 to 10 years, enterprise software goes through this cycle where you have a new theme behind it and new tens of billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars of enterprise values created by technology companies. So my job is to find those companies that'll help customers, help big enterprises, help industrial companies get knowledgeable, use these technologies for competitive advantage. And I think that's what excites us in what's going on right now. It's faster than it's ever been before. It's much more prevalent than ever been before. I think Tom's absolutely right. This is a CEO prerogative. It's anything from how do I use this technology to be more efficient, to compete in the marketplace, but also how do I secure myself from quote unquote bad actors, because everything is now connected and people can get access to whatever I'm doing, whatever. There's no sovereignty of data. And I can keep going about this concept of the haves and the have-nots of data, which I think Virginie was talking about, in the sovereignty of data and how data is stored. And I'll give you one quick example. I was in India last week, and we have a bunch of companies doing business there. The government passed a regulation that said no payment data that is in India, the data can be transferred outside of India. So suddenly, Visa and MasterCard and all these big payment companies are struggling because they process that data in Australia or Singapore. And so that data, though, now becomes sovereign wealth. It becomes the wealth of that nation. And I do think lots of that kind of stuff is going to filter into corporate environments as well. Who has the data, who doesn't? Because all this technology is useless unless you have some data to play with.
Tom, a huge part of AI going forward is going to be the user interface, and I know you guys do a lot of work on that. And I'll preface my question by saying that a couple of weeks ago I interviewed Jim Breyer. Jim Breyer is one of the best venture capitalists on the planet. We at Forbes ranked him the top venture capitalist when he was running Accel Partners. And he's gone all in on AI through Breyer Capital. Mm-hmm. And he says AI companies are structured differently. They need to be multidisciplinary from the very beginning, whereas an old software company might have 20 computer scientists solving a problem, and when you had the aha moment, you'd start adding marketing and sales and all of that. But if you don't get the interdisciplinary element into AI, which includes this human element from the beginning, right. You will go down a wrong path. It'll be hard to reverse that. Yeah. Do you share that idea? And what's your essential idea about AI and the human interface of AI?
Yeah, absolutely. So actually just one step back from that, hearing some of the introduction from the other speakers, a really insightful fundamental principle I think we've heard in working with a professor, Robert Wilcott from Kellogg University, who runs our entrepreneurship team there. He also has his own VC fund. he had this really succinct way of, I think, talking about everything, AI, ML, data, analytics, IoT are all the principal components, but what's the one underlying dynamic that all of those are driving? And what he had stated was, it's the production and provision of products and services ever closer to the point of demand. And I think when we think about the idea of being able to deliver in the moment, whether that's in Uber as a service, I'm standing on a street corner and I request that and it just arrives, whether it's something in my shopping cart that by 2025, 40% of all shipments in the United States are going to be delivered in 2 hours or less. It's going to be instant delivery. Amazon just announcing delivery to your trunk. DHL and Audi doing it in Europe. It's the idea of that production and provision of products and services closer to the point of demand. To Tom's point around an Amazon and a Walmart, you know, a Walmart store, this is shifting, right? But take a Walmart, take any retail store. I could walk into that store as a shopper. I could look around. I could pick something off the shelf, put it back, maybe get frustrated, walk out, and that brick and mortar retailer wouldn't even know I walked in, right? Contrast that with an e-commerce situation where I'm on an online site. Every hover of my mouse over an item is being tracked, whether it goes into my electronic basket or it comes out, what website it came from, how long I'm spending looking at certain product. All of that data is collected to provide a personalized experience. So being able to bring that digital representation of a physical environment is where the opportunity lies in order to be able to deliver to this on-demand economy of production and provision of product and service closer to the point of demand. So whether that's a cross-dock, it's a healthcare facility, it's a retailer, everybody's looking at it, instrument their environment to collect digital insights that then become the currency to driving better decision-making. So if you look at the evolution of that now to, you know, the question around the user interface, if that occurs, everything I just described, if we get digital capture of physical environments that provide the same level of visibility as their online counterparts, then computing is no longer about the human initiating the interaction with the machine, right? This is all we do with our cell phones today. You're always the initiator of interaction for the most part with your mobile phone. Computing then shifts, once this evolves, to the compute platform becomes the initiator of interaction with the person. So before I was smart enough to even know what to ask or to look up or to search, I'm being directed, I'm being told. And that's the bridge that AI brings to take all of that data, provide those insights, and then mobilize them at the right time to the right person in the right way. And that's where we see, you know, absolutely unprecedented opportunity to use that insight to not just direct strategies, perhaps, but even direct a worker in a warehouse environment as to where they should go next to take that, you know, what we call the best next action. What's the very best thing that 100,000 workers restocking shelves at a retailer in Europe can do at every moment in time in order to optimize their productivity? And you just can't do that, man. You've got to use AI, you've got to use data, you've got to collect it digitally. So we see that interface really shifting from human-led to computer-led.
And not everybody's comfortable with that, and as machines begin to develop that kind of sense of who we are and what we're going to do next, we're going to come back toward the end of the panel and talk about, I think, some of the dangers, because certainly in the water, particularly in the popular press, about some of the downsides of AI. But I wanted to work Usman in, and what do you think are the highest impact areas right now and in the near future for AI?
Most of the prominent AI companies are focused on increasing the click ad rate or filling up your baskets. But we believe that the biggest impact AI will bring would be in the physical world. So how can we make the manufacturing plant more safer through autonomy? How can we make a gas turbine that's providing so much energy to the world? Can that be made more predictive? How can a drone make decisions when they have to spot something or to drive themselves? So our belief is to focus on the cyber physical world and make an impact, and autonomous vehicle is a great example of that. That would be in the short run, would be the greatest areas that AI can impact. Obviously, the AI researchers have very lofty goals. They want to solve global warming. They want to be able to beat the best playing FIFA soccer team by 2050. So they have lofty goals, but in the near term, I feel that the most impactful areas are in the physical world, including warfare. I think warfare is a topic that we don't talk about as much, but as we move into the AI world, the warfare is going to look very different. I do not anticipate two developed countries going into war that would look very traditional. So the physical world is where AI would make the most impact in my mind.
Tom, I think that Usman is onto something really big here. The physical economy has not had this digital transformation in the same way that the digital and knowledge industries have over the past 20 years, and that's a huge opportunity. What kinds of wins with benefits are you seeing in fields, from manufacturing to agriculture and physical industries like that?
I agree with Usman that this is moving rapidly out of the internet into the industrial, commercial economies and into the defense industry. I'll give you some examples of projects that we're engaged in. Enel is the largest utility in the free world, based in Rome. They have 60 million meters in 40 countries. Putting that in perspective, there's about 100 million meters in the United States, serviced by 3,250 utilities. So in Spain and Italy, we've aggregated the data from 42 million smart meters, all the telemetry from transformers, substations, reclosers, capacitance banks, and home thermostats. This is 10 trillion rows of data into a petabyte image that grows at 300 gigabytes a day. We process these transactions at 1 million transactions per second. The grid is the largest and most complex machine ever built. It was designed by Thomas Edison and George Westinghouse at the beginning of the 20th century. At the beginning of the 21st century, we're upgrading to this thing called the smart grid, which is essentially censoring all the devices in the value chain so they become remotely machine addressable. Smart meters, smart thermostats, transformers, substations, reclosers, and what have you. So we can take all those telemetry, process these data in the cloud, and increase the efficiency, resiliency, and lower the cost of power generation, distribution, and consumption, and then decrease the greenhouse gas footprint by, say, 50%. So we do this at Enel, we do this at ENGIE, we do it at Con Ed, we do it at New York Power Authority. So that would be an example. Another, very real example is the United States Air Force, where we're doing AI-based predictive maintenance for basically 39 platforms, 5,000 aircraft. We can talk about the non-deployment rates of some of these aircraft, but they're higher than you might think. And for a relatively small amount of money, using AI and very important natural language processing, because a lot of these platforms, like say the AWACS, E3 Sentry, which is an AWACS, you all know what it is, a Boeing 707 platform, is built in 1958. It has no telemetry. So here you have maintenance logs, pilot logs, flight logs, and so yes, basically use NLP, natural language processing, to build machine learning classifiers and deep learning classifiers to identify system failures before they fail, so that when the pilot pushes the button and go, the aircraft can launch. So we're seeing, again, Enel's looking for 6.7 billion euros in economic benefit a year from this project. If I'm not mistaken, the United States Air Force spends order of 50 billion a year maintaining their equipment. So the economics at 3M, we're looking to save $5 billion a year in production applications. So you're seeing more than pilots, you're seeing digital transformations of very large global industries. One comment, I would say, much of this technology was conceived of by Marvin Minsky and others at MIT, say, 70 years ago. And now it's enabled by elastic cloud computing, where essentially you have computational capacity and storage is basically free. If it's not free, it will be soon. So this enables AI. But the idea that this is a robust technology that's been on the shelf for 70 years is simply, I think, not quite true. I mean, this whole business of AI, deep learning, machine learning, is in an embryonic state. The cell is divided about 4 times, and what we're going to see develop in the next 10 years is really going to be quite remarkable.
You started talking about how AI around the globe will affect corporate prospects, and Tom led off by talking about extinction events and a higher rate of attrition among large organizations and a changing of the pecking order based on companies that get this and apply it smartly and those that don't. I mean, how much of that plays into your own investment decisions, not only for companies in the AI and IT space, but mainstream organizations that if they get this AI stuff, they're going to have a robust future, and if they don't, they could find themselves in trouble very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the things to start with is we talked a little bit about singularity, but when we talk about singularity, we talk about technology singularity. And I think my personal view is that economic singularity is going to come before technology singularity, and that's the point at which AI basically displaces a large amount of jobs in the market through automation. Of course, that has a huge impact on the corporate world. And it doesn't have to be the majority, it can be a large minority. So companies who are going to win in that game will have to be sustainable in the sense that they'll have to think of their employees, they'll have to invest much more than we do today in terms of retraining employees or thinking about their business model, et cetera, et cetera. And I think if you look at the corporate world overall, you'll have really two camps. So you'll have the old economy areas, so the ones you don't want to be in the camp of, Kodak, or the ones that are basically died, right? But you might still want to be in a Starbucks who could use drones to deliver coffee on demand. That would actually really help their balance sheet. You don't need to have all this fancy real estate at very high cost, right? And you'd be able to adapt. So that's one side. The other side, really companies who can be innovative, and they're, we don't have too much time to talk about this, but there are some areas that are absolutely crucial to think about. One is healthcare. So there are three revolutions going on right now that I think are so important to the world of healthcare as AI applies to it. And that's genomics, nanotechnology, and AI. Of course, if you put quantum computer, which is a little bit further out on top of that, it means that the prospects in health tech are enormous. And I think going back a bit to what you were saying, if you think about how the human brain and computers can work together, think about blind people being able to see, think about deaf people being able to hear, but beyond that, memory, et cetera, et cetera. So there's an enormous scope here. Communication is another one. So we talked about NLP, natural language processing. More and more computers are able to understand and read in context. So a computer now can make the difference between two words, garbage. Garbage that's garbage, and garbage that might be somebody saying that something is not good. Now, the more computers can relate to a context, the more we'll be able to use AI in terms of scanning news around topics. So I would love it if every morning I could come, or I would get an update every hour saying, those are the latest news on AI, those are the latest news on this company, those are the latest news, but in a way that the content is relevant. And of course, you've heard about AI managing your house, for example. I mean, that is something that will happen. So security is going to be a big investment area. Clearly, one of the areas that everybody's concerned about is autonomous weapons. How do you recognize them? How do you dissociate them from drones? Smart viruses on computers that can come and give instructions to your bank and delete the email that the bank sends you to say, did you really do this transaction? So the whole security aspect is going to be a very, very vast area. And the last one I'd like to talk about is education. Education and, of course, leisure. As people have more time, if you believe that AI will, in fact, do a lot of the jobs, people will spend more time on virtual reality, leisure, traveling, etc. But education, the way we educate our kids are going to change. Teachers will become coach, and digital assistants will download if you want the knowledge. But we also need to train a lot of the people who will lose their jobs. And I think that's really, really important, the scope for education to become much bigger in the next 10, 20 years is vastly underestimated in my view.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that will be one of these things I think we come back to when we talk about are there downsides. But Sumant, Tom mentioned that you need, for AI, you need at least a couple things. You need blazingly fast computational power at a reasonable cost, and AWS and Microsoft Azure and others are providing that, and it's stunning. Parenthetically, Diane Green, who runs Google Cloud, told us at a Forbes conference a year ago, she thinks that the computational gains on a year-by-year basis are now moving at twice the pace of Moore's Law, right. which was the governing pace setter for the last 50 years. You compound that, and that just yields some amazing things. And you need data. You need data. Healthcare, which has been mentioned. The great solutions in healthcare are only going to be as good as people willing to share their data, their personal data.
Which is where maybe the United States is at a competitive disadvantage because of the regulations put in for the right reasons no longer valid. So there's a whole sort of movement going on in this world. I would want to caution though, conceptually these things have a lot of promise. And a lot of people, really smart people, are working on these solutions, but we are very early in the cycle of what's real. So I'll give you an example. There's a company which is worth tens of billions of dollars called ServiceNow, which helps automate the service desk within an enterprise. Now, I would say I have yet to have a satisfactory service call when I call AT&T for my cell phone service. I mean, they are worth billions of dollars, tens of billions. It doesn't work. And that's the kind of things that AI can help solve because of natural language processing, because of being able to look at so much data that you cannot do it in a structured fashion. You have to do it in an unstructured fashion. That's all driven by the work that companies like Google and Facebook, and before them Overture, Yahoo, Amazon have done in trying to write this cost curve of bringing these technologies to a place where you can use them in a cost-efficient manner. We leverage that work. I think the rest of the world is the beneficiary. In their wisdom, they made a lot of this open source. And that kind of is what's driving this revolution. And I think Tom mentioned they're all different facets of the same thing, whether it's the IoT framework or big data applied to machine learning or natural language processing, or a communication sort of between the human and the machine, which is no longer just one way, or is an ongoing fashion. So I think all of these enable a lot, but we're still very early in the process. Even getting that damn ServiceNow thing to work, it's not easy. Mm-hmm. And we have 7, 8 PhDs working on one small little company trying to solve that problem. It's not easy.
Mm-hmm. Well, in the case of AT&T, the problem may be at the implementation level rather than the innovation level.
Any company, service desks.
Comment.
Yeah, service desks generally have very low NPS scores. Why is that? Because of the ability of a human being to be able to process in real time somebody's data, which is probably sitting in 6 different enterprise silos, and come up with a solution that works for them.
Tom, in an AI-enabled company, every C-level person's job changes profoundly. You think about the finance department, the CFO, and all the people that report to the CFO, or you think about the chief operating officer or the chief information officer. They all structure what they do based on a system of records.
Yeah.
But you believe that AI now takes us beyond that to a system of what you call a system of reality. Tell us what you mean by that, and then how does that change the functions and the jobs inside of a company?
Yeah, sure. So that's a term we've used just to encapsulate, a broader message that a lot of the other panelists have spoken about. But the notion of innovation happening in a lot of the areas that, in a lot of ways, Tom Siebel that, started driving a lot of these system of record. In the case of CRM, as he mentioned, would be one. Enterprise resource planning, to use warehouse management systems, electronic medical records. They're all basically telling our customers, we service about 95% of the Fortune 500, what they should be doing, right? That's how we've kind of run our operations. That's how the supply chain's been run for the last several decades, is you're operating on a plan that's largely in the past, right? Telling you what you should be doing. And those is a widely known term, systems of record. And where we see all of this going as we instrument physical spaces and the cyber-physical system revolution that was spoken about is going from those systems of record to systems of reality, right? So you're no longer operating on what should be happening. You're operating on what is happening at every moment in time. So you don't create a plan at the beginning of a work shift that is, an a priori plan that extends for 8 hours. Your plan, based on a system of reality, emerges moment to moment. So if I'm that, and this is the competitive conundrum for a lot of companies that have deep-rooted, long, expensive IT investments in systems of record that say, no, my truck driver gets up in the morning, he's got a manifest, he gets in the truck, he runs an 8-hour route. I know what that 8-hour route looks like at the beginning of the day, and he executes on it. Is that going to enable you to deliver products and services closer to the point of demand? Absolutely not. What you need is a system of reality that says, my truck driver gets up in the morning, he gets in the truck, and I'm ingesting all of this contextual information that everybody's spoken about. Where are my customers? Where are goods? Where's the truck? What's the weather? What is the traffic on I-95? I'm assimilating all of that information together, and I'm directing that driver as to where they should go in the moment. So those 8 hours are, I don't know any more than maybe several minutes into the future from a system of record it's going to happen. I'm just operating on this system of reality. And so if you're going to embrace that, as you pointed out around traditional roles, you've got to kind of throw away the rule book. And one of the biggest barriers we've seen in adoption, even when you come up with killer use cases, where we've been able to bring a number of them forward, the biggest barrier of adoption is, do you have the ability to change? I've been running my dock, I've been running my fleet, I've been running my hospital the same way for the last 30 years, and the technology is not so much the impediment as it is to say, how am I going to train my people? How are they going to operate different? Am I going to trust a machine to drive every minute of my operations? And those that have nothing to lose, which are the startups and the young bloods that are coming into the space, embrace it from day one. Those that have everything to lose, that are standing on the top of a multi-billion-dollar industry, or in some cases close to $1 trillion, it's a long way down, right? So it's a lot harder to adopt that. But that's got to be the mindset from day one. And if you think about it, it's a truth. It's not debatable. This is the world we're going to, is one that is going to have these plans unfold in an increasing way, especially as you get to the edge of the network where things are getting delivered, picked up, patients are being administered to, goods are being manufactured, are going to be unfolding moment to moment. You've got to be able to react that way.
Usman, there have been cycles of AI investment and lots of hopes and dreams that new large organizations would be created out of those, but it's not really played out. Why should we, if you've been around it and you've invested, you've probably had some disappointing AI investment cycles. But I'm hearing this sense of inevitability on this panel now. Why should we believe that it is different, that AI has finally got all the necessary structures to achieve what everybody on the panel is talking about?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I would like to answer it by addressing the history. So there are two reasons why historically there were AI winters twice before. So we call this AI era AI 3.0. So the first reason is the first two eras of artificial intelligence, not many people know, were driven by psychologists. They were obsessed with creating human-like intelligence, and they believed that human intelligence is a manifestation of one or two algorithms that could replicate human intelligence, whether it was planning, doing math, understanding English, or any other language. And that approach was faulty. The AI 3.0 is built on the fundamentals of engineering. We're not creating the mind of a human being. We're trying to solve a problem that much better than human beings can. So it's a very engineering-driven approach. The second reason is AI 1.0 and 2.0 died in the labs. There were no real commercial applications. AT&T, back then Bell Labs, tried a few applications. IBM had this Deep Blue, but those were not really commercial applications. This time around, why I feel it's so optimistic about artificial intelligence, that there's so much economic momentum and investment in the field, that this will continue to spur. And AI is out of the box, and it's hard to put it back. When we will look back at the history of artificial intelligence 50, 30 years from now, I think deep learning, or the discovery of deep learning by Professor Hinton, would be considered as the big bang moment, where after that, incremental changes will get us very far. So those are the primary reasons, the economic momentum that we've already gathered, as well as the very different approach to to artificial intelligence.
Before we go to audience questions in about 10 minutes and wrap the panel up with those, I'd like any of our panelists to jump in and with any thoughts about whether there is a downside out there, whether it is massive uncontrollable viruses, robots out of control, unemployment that is bigger than anything we've ever seen. I mean, just any of you jump in with those thoughts, and any of the other panelists, feel free to challenge your fellow panelists on that.
Rich, let me comment, and I'd like to amplify Tom's comments and Usman's. Like, the technology issues are solved. I mean, we can do this, okay? In a lot of it, in addition to what Usman has said, is the underlying enabling technologies that come online in the 21st century that enable us to do this. We have infinite computational storage capacity, essentially for free. Okay, and by the time Satya and Bezos and Sergey are done, like, carving each other up, the price will be zero. Okay, so in 1953, we didn't have infinite capacity at no cost. The cell phone in your pocket is $1 billion in computational capacity in 1970, $1 billion. So the enabling technologies are here. So this business of aggregating large data sets, processing them at unimaginable speeds, and then applying these sciences of machine learning and deep learning, it enables an entirely new field that we call predictive analytics. This is happening hard stop. Companies that do not adopt these technologies will not be in existence in 10 years. Take this to the bank. Now, what is the obstacle? We are the obstacle. Okay. If you have 77,000 employees in 60 socialist countries, and I would put the United States in that category, okay, but a company like Adele, or you're running the United States Air Force, this is less the case in the Air Force, but where you have labor contracts, you have workers' unions, you have people who have been trained, okay, they have contracts, they have compensation plans, they have organizational structures that tells them exactly how to do their job. Let's say we're maintaining a power grid or maintaining digital oil fields. Okay, and all of a sudden you come up, your computer guys and your data scientists come up with, say, that you're going to entirely change the way you're going to do your job. And all these people, by the way, see this technology as a threat to their jobs, and it is. Okay, it is a threat to their jobs. How do you get these people to adopt these technologies? So the limits on the growth of this are going to be constrained not by the technology. We have solved that. We have trivialized those problems, okay? The non-trivial problem is the human factors and the change management issues, and these are very, very interesting problems to solve.
I would add to that the government angle. I think that current government structures are ill-equipped to deal with this. And I think there is a risk, if you go back to the scenario that I painted earlier on, where you have either populist governments or dictators enabled by this vacuum that is happening. And I think we have to think about two parts of new government structure. One is government as a service, which living in Singapore is actually really interesting because the amount of automated and done in this area is quite amazing, but also a different kind of leadership in government with much more knowledge in technology and visions on how to deal with those issues. And I touched on that when I talked about the corporate world, and companies who will survive will also need to deal with their employees, training their employees, and have the courage to do that. I agree, but I think the government part is very tricky to resolve.
And Li Shangloon has a degree in computer science from Harvard, correct?
Mm-hmm.
There's one, I think, at least as an investor, the way I started investing probably almost 20 years ago in technology. And we were always sort of clubbed into, oh, you're the technology vertical investor. an asset manager would look at us and say, or a big pool of capital and say, oh, you're my technology bucket, I got to put money in technology. And what's changed now is that technology is no longer a vertical. It's a horizontal in every industry. And therefore, it touches a lot more people than it ever has before, including livelihood, including education, including sovereignty of nations. I think in India, they have this new sort of vision, and they've put this program into place where 1.2 billion people have an identity, a digital identity, that's being held in a government database. So forget about privacy, and we can go down the path of privacy. I asked someone, aren't you worried about your privacy? He said, heck no. I'm so excited the government knows I exist. They didn't care about me before. So, people have different, I think, in different parts of the world, this is having different effects. They have this healthcare mandate for 500 million people, and how do you roll that out without this kind of a system? So there is a sea change in how this technology is affecting people's lives, and it's not going to stop. It's becoming faster and more meaningful, and technology by itself doesn't have good or evil intents. It's people who use them, and I guess there's potential on both sides. For cybersecurity is a major issue. I think every enterprise, every board, every nation is thinking about it because it's become the new warfare, whether it's messing with your elections or hacking into corporate secrets or destroying networks or bringing down a grid. We deal with it every day in every one of our companies. So I think this is an open-ended, never-ending conversation. Having said that, it's not something it's something that's here already. It's not something on the come.
One other thought is the notion of augmented to autonomous, right? So everybody likes to sort of think in binary terms a lot of times, which is, we're in this, manual crunch, business intelligence, data visualization. I've got to make all the decisions on my own as a human to, the robot Singularity, and we're extinct as cognitive entities, and the machines completely take over. And we see there's a really long tail in the middle there where we have an opportunity to augment. The radiologist to be able to look at the X-ray from instead of natural language processing, it's video processing off of that that radiological information, and using that to be able to guide and pinpoint that radiologist as to where they should look in order to come up with the proper read of that particular X-ray. Or it's the worker that I mentioned earlier, the frontline worker. It's the healthcare worker being directed to the right place to find a piece of capital equipment, a simple thing like an IV pump that are often misplaced within hospitals. So being able to be guided with that environment using location technology. So you're augmenting the human in a way that makes them more efficient, helps them get their job done better, delivers on quality of care in a healthcare setting. And then as that augmentation continues to advance, obviously we're going to see, and it's not going to all happen evenly, the automation take root. And some of it has already. I think the brawn side of automation, if you will, if you think about it as brain and brawn, has already started. The brain side of it is coming on board, where these cognitive systems are doing the diagnosing. But that's not going to be just a switch that happens overnight. And during that transition, we'll have time to talk about policy and job retraining, and there'll be casualties in that, I'm sure, as it happens. But I don't think it's this just sudden shift from we've got to ingest the data manually to all of a sudden, things are just happening in an automatic fashion, and we're cut out of the picture as a human race. So I think we just got to give a lot of thought and look at the opportunity is phenomenal in that spectrum, going from where we are today to the augmentation cycle.
However, Usman, I think you're right, but the X factor is the sudden acceleration of the pace of evolution. Because if Diane Green is even roughly right, and I've had this conversation with Tom Siebel, and you'd find the same thing at Scott Guthrie of Microsoft Azure, or Andy Jassy at Amazon Web Services, or anybody who's really awake, that if we're compounding in an annual gain in computational power per dollar spent of 60 or 70% per year instead of 25 or 30% per year, that compounds rather rapidly. It looks sudden. It doesn't take too long for that to look, that hockey sticks. So what could blindside us is we're now moving down the road 2 or 3 times faster than we were before.
Absolutely. We are we are really good at overestimating our ability to estimate. and when these are exponential trends, right, it's very hard to estimate long-term trends. Short-term, we feel we overestimate. So I think we are overestimating the power of AI today, which is phenomenal and great. But we are not able to estimate, or we are underestimating how fast we are getting there and what are some of the implications. And look, when McKinsey projected the cell phone market back in 1980s for then their client AT&T, they projected 900,000 cell phones by 2000. And you would agree, I think they missed the mark a little bit. So I think that's something like that is happening. The rate of change is exponential, and it's going to hit us a lot quicker than we think. So, and then there are a lot of the things that we talked about: cybersecurity, public policy, social impact, cyber warfare. All of these things, I don't think we are well prepared for it. So the exponential growth is something that I think we are underestimating.
Well, let's open it up for audience questions. So you can just raise your hand. Somebody will get a mic in front of you. And I don't know if it's the protocol of Malcolm to say who you are, but if that is the protocol, do that. And you can ask a question of any one of the panelists or all of the panelists.
My name is Brian Sethurst. I'm from Storytech Immersive. My question is to all the panelists. You talk about the downside of AI. Data is expanding exponentially. There are data centers being built at alarming rates because they have to be built. And I would just like to know how you feel about the environmental impact, the consumption of energy, the heat that comes off of data centers, and that many of these data centers are not green powered. Where is the future going in terms of the damage that data centers could actually cause on the planet?
Is that with or without Bitcoin?
Let me take a shot at that.
Probably with.
Let me take a shot at that. Okay, the application of these technologies to increase the efficiencies in the value chains of power generation delivery and hydrocarbon exploration, production, and delivery dramatically exceed, okay, the power generation costs associated with the data centers. So by a factor of 10.
In fact, I'm not sure of the exact numbers, but I was reading an article this morning on how Google is using DeepMind, a company that bought technology, to make that data center more efficient in power use, include resources.
I think the other important factor is AI is localization. It manages systems in a much more efficient way.
Yeah.
So by doing that, you actually probably, if you take the holistic approach, your data center might be added energy consumption, but what you do from that data center and how you consume electricity or power or whatever across the whole system is probably much more efficient. And actually, from a climate change standpoint, AI is one of the key hope that we have to resolve the issues along that line. So all in all, it will help.
Yeah, we have one over here.
Hi, my name is François Benamias. I'm the CEO of Audemars Piguet, a watch company. I'm going to ask you a question. You've been talking about a lot of efficiencies, savings, getting better, faster, maybe except you on the left. All of us, we are pretty much from the same generation. And I have to say, are you scared about anything at all? Or, yes, the speed is extremely fast, and no matter what we're going, without taking the chance, or maybe we'll hit a wall as hard as we could have ever imagined, or it's okay. You have kids. How would you tell your kids what's going on and what they're going to expect? Are you scared about anything at all?
This is like every other technology revolution. The steam engine, the Jacquard loom, the industrial revolution, okay? It is unstoppable, okay? The benefits will be significant, and the human costs will be staggering. Okay, and they are not being anticipated. I completely agree that there is no policy to deal with this. We're going to have massive number of jobs are going to cease to exist. The idea that we're going to retrain taxi drivers in New York whose jobs are disappearing to be data scientists, this is just crazy talk. Okay, it's not going to happen. Okay, these people are going to be unemployable. Okay, the privacy implications when we have all of your health data, all of your health history, all of your genome sequence in a database, which we will have very soon. I mean, your health insurance company will know things about you that you don't want to know, okay? How are they going to use that data? I think the ethical issues that we face going forward, the privacy issues that we face going forward, the job dislocation issues that we face going forward, and the cybersecurity issues that we face that are completely ignored by everybody in Washington, okay, are staggering, they're daunting, they're important, and they need to be dealt with. And anybody who looks at historical context could see this as clear as the light of day.
And when it comes to kids, I probably, I will say, I have 2 kids.
Let me tell you what I really think. Sorry, I'm sorry. Sorry.
They tell me more what's going on than I do, but even though I'm a technology investor. So I think the kids will be fine.
And I think it's never been, you know, from that perspective, it's never been easier to deploy capital and create value. I mean, because of all the things we spoke about, right? Storage is free, bandwidth is free, computing's free. If you've got an idea that improves an experience, and you can execute on that idea, the capital is not going to be the problem. And if you look back, 50 or 100 years ago, that was the much bigger problem, was getting the capital. And the notion that everybody's expectations now are moving in this direction. We had the CEO of a large transportation carrier, think about it, delivering parcels. And they said, Starbucks is setting the expectation for my customers. And I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, a millennial orders coffee on their phone, they put in their preferences, they pay for it on their phone, they sort of just swoop in and pick it up. And he wants to know why, those millennials, I should say, want to know why can't that company do that for them? Why can't they order a pickup the same way? Why can't they order something online and have it delivered in that exact type of way? And so think about the opportunities, the businesses, the subscription models, look at all the innovation that's happening out there around. So I would say from my kids' perspective, that's the conversation I'm having with them, is that the opportunity's never been richer.
I think beyond that, and I agree with that, but if you really believe, Kurzweil thinks that technology singularity will be reached in 2049 or around there. Yeah. At that point in time, we will know as much as we would know, what the black hole really is. I mean, we don't know. That's the reality. If you define singularity as the point where human intelligence and machine intelligence, i.e. with intuition, creativity, and everything else, is equal, given the power and the speed that machines have, it's very clear that we don't know what's going to happen. It's an evolution. My sense is the fear will delay technology, singularity a little bit, but it's inevitable, and that's the big question.
I don't think it will delay because I think there are too many countries involved. The U.S. and China are in maybe the most important global competition, of all time to get this, and I don't see anybody slowing down. Final thoughts.
Regulation might do it, right? Privacy, if you don't get access to your data, or you can't use your data, and that's why China might have a competitive edge in some ways.
Jim Breyer thinks it's a 2-horse race, and that China has momentum. But final thoughts. We have a minute to go. Usman or Sandal?
Yeah, just one thing, just to echo on that question is every generation figures out their challenges. I think 60 years ago, parents were probably worried about coal and nuclear war. The challenge for this generation, our kids, would be that. One thing I tell my kids is learn how to learn. We don't know what types of jobs will be displaced. Andrew Ng at Stanford Machine Learning Lab, he just published a paper 4 months ago saying their machine learning algorithm is performing better than 3 out of 4 radiologists. Radiologists get paid about $500,000 today. It's a high-paying job. So what I tell my kids is learn how to learn, because they might have to change their careers multiple times and be willing to go back to school. So it's going to be a different world.
Well, please join me in thanking our panelists for this illuminating time.